This is going to be a review over the experimental design section 4.2.
By Caden, Roberto, Serena, and Nitia.
So first we're going to go over an observational study and its difference with experiments. An observational study is defined as a study that observes individuals and measures variables of interest but does not attempt to influence the responses. Overall, it gathers data, a treatment isn't applied, there's no control, but it still follows the random, independent, and normal conditions. Types of observational studies include surveys or simple observations such as watching the behavior of animals in the wild or the interactions between teacher and students in the classroom. The results of this study can be applied to the population but usually doesn't give means for causation.
An experiment actively imposes treatment to measure the responses on subjects, such as asking questions like, does an aspirin reduce the chance of a heart attack? Or can yoga help dogs live longer? This is a statistical study in which we actually do something, a treatment, to people, animals, or objects, which are referred to as the experimental units, to observe the response. In order to make an experiment, it has to follow replication, have a control, be randomly assigned, and follow the random, independent, and normal conditions. Replication is the experimental design principle. You have to use enough experimental units in each group so that any differences in the effects of the treatments can be distinguished from chance differences between the groups. The control is also an experimental design principle that mandates keeping other variables that might affect the response the same for all groups. Along with the control, you can have a control group whose primary purpose is to provide a baseline for comparing the effects of the other treatments depending on the purpose of the experiment. Random assignment eliminates confounding variables. It is another experimental design principle, and it uses chance to assign experimental units to treatments. Doing so helps create roughly equivalent groups of experimental units by balancing the effects of other variables among the treatment groups. There are several ways to apply randomization. We're going to talk more about it in the next slide.
There are several different ways to randomize data, which also eliminates different compounding variables. There's the random number generator, the table of random digits, mechanically or physically randomizing with a hat or something similar to that, and there are also different aspects of randomization such as block randomization and stratification. A random number generator is a simple way to randomize data. Using a calculator's random int function, or RANDINT, you can apply a range to the calculator and digitally randomize data. The table of random digits, also known as table D, is another way of randomizing data. Using a random line number or a line number given in the problem, one can easily simplify and randomize data. As you can see right here, this would be a similar sequence of numbers that table D also has. An easy tool to remember how to use table D is to divide each section by two numbers. So 38 would be the first two numbers of this section, then 19, then 37, then 40. Of course, you would want to include 00 to 99 if that was your range, or 01. 001 to 100 if you preferred that, depending on the amount of digits that you want to use. One should also include or disclude replication, depending on the problem, which would include repeating numbers, and make sure to stay in the range of the problem. Lastly, one can mechanically or physically randomize data. This includes randomly drawing from a hat. A large number of problems on the AP test will require this as a use of randomization. So let's start with designing a randomized set of data this way. The first step is to assign numbers to an experimental treatment or unit. So let's say 00 to 99 to represent a certain set of data. The next step is to write them down on equal-sized pieces of paper and place them in a hat. Subjects will randomly, without looking, draw from the hat and pick a piece of paper. This number assigned will directly correlate with the treatment being used or the experimental unit. Two different forms of randomizing include blocking and stratification. Blocking would include surveys and entails separating the data from the beginning and picking from that. Stratification is a similar process but can be applied to experiments where it separates the data into separate groups and randomizes from that spot on. These three next examples will use the knowledge that you have learned from both the presentation and this video and test you. Take some time to read the problem and we'll discuss the answer momentarily. Now that you have read the problem and think you found your answer, here is the actual answer. Answers may vary. Level of academic motivation. Those who drink may have less academic motivation, leading to lower grades. So if students do not do well, we are not sure if it is because of alcohol itself or because of lower level of academic motivation. This next problem reflects randomization using different methods, using slips of paper, using Table D, and technology. Refer to the previous couple slides to refresh on randomization. We will discuss the answer momentarily.
First, for A, you have to write all the names on slips of paper, then place them in a container and mix them thoroughly. Select one of the slips and assign that name to treatment 1. Select another name and assign it to treatment 2. And then assign a third name to treatment 3. Rotate through the treatments until all have been assigned. Okay, for B, using Table D, you need to assign each student a number between 001 and 150, and then pick a spot on Table D, and then read the first 75 numbers between 001 and 150, and assign those objects to treatment 1. Do the same thing for treatment 2. Assign 75 different people to treatment 2. It is important to skip repeats or any numbers that are not between 001 and 150. Lastly, for C, using technology, you need to assign each student a number between 001 and 150, and then using the random integer function in the calculator, ignore all repeats and assign the first 75 numbers chosen to treatment 1 and the next 75 to treatment 2.
This problem involves creating your own design for an experiment. You will be creating a chart that describes how you would implement your design as well as randomize. You should draw your chart, then look at the next slide and compare.